is to use the words that have been prescribed to us by Allah and giving to those special people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In that way, the dua and supplication becomes more effective, and they are to be heard and to be given benefit to the believers. As we do the last session today, I would like to go over the supplication which Allah has mentioned in Surah Ibrahim. And these are the supplication of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam. ربنا إنك تعلم ما نخفي وما نعلن وما يخفى على الله من شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء رب اجعلني مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتي ربنا وتقبل دعاء ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. There are three supplications which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us from the du'as of Ibrahim alayhi salam. We went through some of the supplication that Ibrahim alayhi salam made in Surah Al-Baqarah. Now this is a second area where we find some supplications of Ibrahim alayhi salam. This is an incident in which that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded Prophet Ibrahim to leave his wife and his baby Ismail alayhi salam in the desert and then go back fulfilling the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as he was departing from this location in Mecca, he made this supplication to Allah, رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ تَعْلَمُ مَا نُخْفِي وَمَا نُعْلِنُ. That, oh Allah, you know best what we conceal inside our hearts and what we expose with our tongue. Sometimes a person is not willing to expose his grief in such a way that those who are affected around him can see that grief. And Ibrahim alayhi salam was in a very difficult condition here because he didn't want to show his inner grief and expose it in such a way that will make his wife become affected by the same situation that he was affected with. So he is making dua to Allah that, Allah, you know my inner grief and you know my outer grief. You know what's going on inside me. وَمَا يَخْفَى عَلَى اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي السَّمَاءِ. And there is nothing in this world that is hidden from you, O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nor in the heavens, not in the heavens and nor on earth. What is this dua? This is the dua to accept the powers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah, He has the power and He knows the condition of every single person. When a person says, oh Allah, you know my inner condition, then he acknowledges that Allah is looking at his situation and Allah will help and assist in whatever condition this person might be. And at the same time, acknowledging the powers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives strength to a person in his belief, gives him the ability to overpower whatever condition he or she may be going with. So this dua is actually effective to recite when a person is going through tough times, when he's going through difficult times, and he's not able to expose those situations in front of people, but he has this pain inside. He's going through this tough situation, whether it may be through family, it may be at work, maybe whatever it may be. Sometimes a person doesn't want to expose it. And this is what Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was going through a very big test of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by leaving his family in a desert. And he didn't want to expose it because his wife will be affected by it very much. So he kept it inside, but he exposed it in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah, you know my inner condition and you know my outer condition. And there is nothing that is hidden from you, whatever I do or whatever thought goes into my mind. When a person recites this dua at the time of grief and difficulty, Allah brings relief in his pain. And He makes him remember that I am not alone. In this situation of mine, I'm not the one who has been abandoned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, Allah is with me. And then, Rabbi Ghfirli, he makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rabbi ja'alni muqim as-salah. That, oh Allah, no matter what pain I'm going through, but do not make me leave obligations. So make me among those who establishing salah. And salah is the first command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the right of Allah azza wa jal. If a person does not pray his salah, then rest of the actions that he performed will not have any effect in his life. Why? Because this is the first haqq of Allah that you're violating. So Ibrahim alayhi salam is making dua to Allah that Allah, I don't want to violate your rights. So Rabbi ja'alni muqim as-salah. And then, وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي, and also, oh my Allah, do not make my children violate your rights. رَبَّنَا وَتَقَبَّلْ دُعَاء, and oh Allah, accept my dua and my ibadah. Dua is an ibadah of Allah. So Allah, accept my dua, whatever supplication I'm making. And that's the first thing that we need to ask Allah, that whenever we make dua, we ask Allah to accept our dua. Ibrahim alayhi salam, after supplicating to Allah, is asking Allah that Allah accept my dua. And then, رَبِّ اغْفِرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيَّ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَوْمَ يَقُومُ الْحِسَابِ. And Allah, forgive me and my parents and all the believers on the day of judgment, where reckoning will happen. So, what we need to worry about the world, in world we need to worry about the rights of Allah, the obedience of Allah. In akhirah, what we need to worry about is the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So both, the best of this world, that I'm willing to fulfill the commands of Allah, and the best of akhirah, I have been given forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person has been given the ability to fulfill the rights of Allah and the ahkam of Allah in this world, and he has been given forgiveness on the day of judgment, this person is successful in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are the supplications, but we conclude our session inshallah. We ask Allah to give us the ability to practice. And all these du'as that we went through, these are part of the Quranic du'as, and we should try to memorize them. And whenever we make du'a to Allah, we should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through these words, because they are the most effective one, and the one that becomes very effective in acceptance in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah to grant us the understanding and the ability to practice. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Jazakumullahu khairan. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.